integrity of my own life. Turns out, I was wrong about that. Just like I was wrong about a lot of things involving my wife, Laura. Laura Staples, she kept her maiden name for real estate, which should have been my first clue, is the kind of woman who lights up a room when she walks in. Blonde, energetic, the type who remembers everyone's birthday and organizes neighborhood barbecues. She sells houses for prestige properties here in our little corner of suburban Texas, and she's damn good at it. Me? I crawl around in attics and basements, checking for termites and foundation cracks. Not exactly the glamorous half of our partnership. We've got 2 daughters, Beth and Janie, 10 and 7, respectively. They're the best part of my life, hands down. Smart as whips, both of them, with their mother's charm and what I hope is a little of their old man's common sense. They were upstairs during the party, supposedly asleep, but probably listening to every word through the heating vents. Kids always know more than you think they do. The party was Laura's idea, of course. "You need to socialize more, Nick," she'd said while addressing invitations. "You spend too much time alone in those crawl spaces. It's not healthy." So there I was, standing in my own living room, watching my wife hold court with about 20 of our neighbors and friends. The usual suspects were all there. Karen Mitchell from next door, married to my old buddy Dave. Amy Rodriguez, Laura's best friend and biggest enabler. Scott Williams, some entrepreneur type who'd moved into the neighborhood 6 months ago and somehow wormed his way into our social circle. My brother Tom, a cop who'd driven over from his beat, and assorted other couples from the subdivision. The beer was flowing, the music was loud, and Laura was in her element. She'd changed into a tight red dress that I hadn't seen before, and she was working the room like a politician at a fundraiser. Every laugh was a little too loud, every gesture a little too animated. I'd seen her like this before at real estate events, but never in our own house. "Nick!" Karen Mitchell appeared at my elbow, already 3 drinks in by the look of her flushed cheeks. "Great party. Laura really knows how to throw them." "Yeah, she's got a gift," I said, watching my wife lean against the kitchen counter, deep in conversation with Scott Williams. His hand was resting on the counter maybe 6 inches from hers. Close enough to be friendly, too close to be innocent. "You're lucky to have her," Karen continued, following my gaze. "I mean, she could have married anyone. Real estate agents meet so many successful people." There it was, the first little needle. Karen had always been the type to deliver compliments that somehow left you feeling worse about yourself. I took a long pull from my beer and decided to let it slide. It was my birthday, after all. The evening wore on, and I found myself increasingly relegated to the role of observer in my own home. Laura was the star of the show, regaling everyone with stories from her latest property sales, laughing at jokes I couldn't hear from across the room, and generally acting like she was single and available. Around 10 o'clock, things started to get interesting. Laura had switched from wine to something stronger, and her voice was carrying more than usual. I was in the kitchen, getting another beer from the fridge, when I heard her talking to Amy and Karen by the sliding door to the patio. "I swear, sometimes I feel like I'm wasting away in this house," Laura was saying, her words slightly slurred. "I mean, Nick's sweet and all, but he has absolutely no ambition. He could have been a paramedic supervisor, maybe even moved into hospital administration, but he chose to inspect houses. Houses? Like that's going to set the world on fire." Amy laughed, that sharp, cutting laugh she'd perfected in high school and never outgrown. "Well, at least he's stable. That counts for something, right?" "Stable," Laura repeated, like she was tasting something bitter. "Yeah, that's one way to put it. Boring is another." I froze with the beer bottle halfway to my lips. Through the kitchen doorway, I could see them clearly. Laura was gesturing with her drink, sloshing a little onto the patio stones. Karen was nodding sympathetically, and Amy was grinning like she was watching her favorite reality show. "You know what I think?" Karen said, leaning in conspiratorially. "I think you deserve better. You're young, you're beautiful, you're successful. You could have any man you wanted." That's what I keep telling her, Amy chimed in. Remember in college? You had guys lined up around the block. Now look at you, stuck in suburbia with a guy who gets excited about finding dry rot. They all laughed at that, and something cold settled in my chest. I'd heard Laura complain about my job before, usually when she'd had a few drinks, but never quite like this, never with such casual cruelty. Speaking of which, Amy continued, lowering her voice just enough that I had to strain to hear, what's the story with that Scott guy? He's been following you around all night like a lost puppy. Laura's laugh was different this time, softer, more secretive. Scott's just a friend. A very attentive friend. Attentive, Karen repeated, the same way Laura had said stable. Is that what we're calling it now? Oh, stop it, Laura said, but she was still smiling. He's just more, I don't know, more everything than what I'm used to. I'd heard enough. I set my beer down on the counter, maybe a little harder than necessary, and walked back toward the living room. The party was still in full swing, but everything felt different now. The laughter seemed forced, the conversations hollow. I was seeing it all through new eyes. Scott Williams was holding court near the fireplace, telling some story about a business deal he'd closed. He was the kind of guy who wore polo shirts that were just a little too tight, showing off his gym membership, and drove a Jeep Wrangler with more accessories than a Swiss Army knife. His hair was perfectly styled, his teeth were too white, and his laugh was too loud. I disliked him from the moment Laura introduced us, but I'd chalked it up to my own insecurities. Now I was wondering if my instincts had been right all along. Nick! Tom appeared beside me, beer in hand. My brother was off duty, but still carried himself like a cop, all straight posture and alert eyes. Hell of a party. Laura really outdid herself. Yeah, she's something else, I said, not taking my eyes off Scott. Tom followed my gaze and frowned slightly. You okay, man? You look like someone walked over your grave. Before I could answer, Laura's voice rose above the general conversation. She was back inside now, standing near the kitchen entrance with Amy and Karen flanking her like bodyguards. You know what? Laura announced to the room, her words carrying that particular clarity that comes right before someone says something they'll regret. I've been thinking, maybe it's time for some changes around here. The conversations died down. Everyone turned to look at her, sensing drama in the air like animals before a storm. Changes? Dave Mitchell asked. He was a good guy, an accountant who coached Little League and never said a bad word about anyone. What kind of changes? Laura gestured broadly, nearly losing her balance. Scott stepped forward slightly, ready to steady her if needed. The movement was automatic, practiced, like he'd done it before. Oh, I don't know, Laura said, her eyes finding mine across the room. Maybe I should trade up, get myself a newer model, something with more horsepower. The room went silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the hardwood floors I'd refinished myself last summer. Karen, emboldened by alcohol and mob mentality, decided to pile on. Well, if you're trading him in, I'll take him. Nick's not so bad. He's handy around the house, and he's got that whole strong, silent thing going on. The laughter that followed was like a slap across the face. Not everyone joined in. Tom looked like he wanted to punch someone, and Dave Mitchell was staring at his shoes in embarrassment, but enough people did to make it clear that this was entertainment for them. My humiliation was their evening's amusement. I stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. Laura was looking at me with a mixture of defiance and something that might have been guilt. Scott was trying not to smirk. Amy was openly grinning, and Karen was still laughing at her own joke. Then something interesting happened. Instead of anger, I felt a strange sense of clarity wash over me. It was like stepping back from a house I'd been inspecting too closely and suddenly seeing all the structural problems at once. I walked over to Karen, who was still giggling and swaying slightly on her feet. She looked up at me with bright, unfocused eyes. probably expecting me to laugh along or make some self-deprecating joke. Instead, I took her hand. "You know what, Karen?" I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "That sounds like a great idea. Let's get out of here." Her laughter died in her throat. "What? Nick, I was just making an offer," I finished, "and I'm accepting. Laura wants to trade up. You want to trade sideways. Seems like everybody wins." I started walking toward the front door, still holding Karen's hand. She stumbled along beside me, too shocked to resist. Behind us, the party erupted in confused chatter. I heard Laura's voice, sharp with panic. Nick, wait! I didn't mean—" But I was already opening the front door. The night air was cool and clean, a relief after the stifling atmosphere inside. I turned back to look at the room full of people who, 5 minutes ago, I'd considered friends. "Thanks for the birthday party," I called out. "Really memorable." Then I walked out, still holding Karen's hand, leaving my wife standing in the wreckage of her own making. Karen and I made it as far as the end of my driveway before she came to her senses and yanked her hand free. "Jesus Christ, Nick, what the hell was that?" She was sobering up fast, the way people do when they realize they've stepped in something they can't wipe off their shoes. "That," I said, fishing my keys out of my pocket, "was me taking you up on your generous offer. I wasn't serious. I was just trying to make a point." "What point was that exactly?" Karen wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking small and cold in her party dress. "That Laura was being a witch. That you deserved better than what she was dishing out in there." I looked back at the house. Through the living room window, I could see people clustered in small groups, probably dissecting what had just happened with the enthusiasm of sports commentators. Laura was nowhere to be seen. "Well, mission accomplished," I said. "Come on, I'll drive you home." The ride to Karen's house took exactly 3 minutes, the joys of suburban living, but it felt like an hour. She spent the entire time explaining herself, apologizing, and generally trying to undo what couldn't be undone. "Dave's going to kill me," she said, as I pulled into her driveway. God, what was I thinking? "You were thinking my wife was treating me like garbage and you wanted to help," I said. "Don't worry about Dave. I'll talk to him." She paused with her hand on the door handle. "Nick, I'm sorry. About all of it. What Laura said, what I said, the whole damn thing." "Don't be sorry," I told her. "Sometimes people need to show you who they really are. Tonight was educational." After Karen went inside, I sat in my truck for a few minutes, trying to decide whether to go home or find a bar somewhere. The decision was made for me when my phone started buzzing with text messages. Laura, of course. "Where are you?" "Nick, please come home. We need to talk. Everyone's gone. The girls are asking where you are." "I'm sorry. I was drunk. I didn't mean what I said." I turned off the phone and drove to a 24-hour diner on the other side of town. I needed coffee and time to think, and I couldn't do either of those things at home. The diner was mostly empty except for a few night shift workers grabbing late meals and a trucker working his way through a stack of pancakes that could have fed a small family. I took a corner booth and ordered coffee and pie, then sat there trying to process what had just happened to my life. The thing is, I'd known something was wrong for months. Laura had been distant, distracted, working later and later hours. She'd started going to networking events that seemed to happen every other night, and she'd developed a sudden interest in fitness that required daily trips to the gym. Classic cheating wife behavior, so obvious it was almost insulting. But knowing something and having it thrown in your face in front of 20 people are two different things entirely. The humiliation was one thing. I could get over that. What bothered me more was the casual cruelty of it. The way she'd looked at me when she made that crack about trading up, like I was a used car she was tired of driving. I was on my 3rd cup of coffee when my brother Tom walked in. He spotted me immediately and slid into the booth across from me. "Figured I'd find you here," he said. You always did like this place when you needed to think. How'd the party end? I asked. Like a funeral. Everyone cleared out about 10 minutes after you left. Laura locked herself in the bedroom. Dave Mitchell took Karen home and looked like he wanted to strangle someone. Amy tried to act like the whole thing was hilarious, but nobody was buying it. Tom signaled the waitress for coffee. Want to tell me what that was all about? So I told him. About the conversation I'd overheard, about the months of suspicious behavior, about the way Scott Williams had been hovering around my wife all evening, like a shark circling wounded prey. Tom said when I finished. I knew there was something off about that guy. Too smooth, you know, like a used car salesman. What do you know about him? Tom's cop instincts kicked in. Not much, but I can find out. Scott Williams, right? Drives that ridiculous Jeep? That's him. I'll make some calls tomorrow. See what comes up. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, drinking coffee and watching the night shift change over to the early morning crew. Finally, Tom spoke up. So, what's the plan? I don't know yet. Go home, I guess. Face the music. And then? I thought about Laura's text messages, about her standing in our living room making jokes about my inadequacies while her boyfriend watched from across the room, about Karen's drunken offer and the laughter that followed. And then I figure out what comes next. I got home around 6 in the morning. Laura's car was in the driveway, and the house was dark except for a single light in the kitchen. I found her sitting at the breakfast table, still in her red dress from the night before, looking like she'd aged 5 years in the last 6 hours. "Nick," she said when she saw me. "Thank God. I was so worried." "Were you?" She flinched at the coldness in my voice. "Of course I was. You just disappeared, with Karen Mitchell, for Christ's sake. Seemed like a good idea at the time. She made me an offer. She was drunk. She didn't mean it. But you meant what you said." Laura's face crumpled. "No, I didn't. I was drunk too. I don't know what I was doing. Showing off, I guess." "For who? Scott?" The name hung in the air between us like a challenge. Laura's eyes darted away from mine, and I had my answer. "It's not what you think," she said quietly. "What do I think, Laura? That we're sleeping?" She winced like I'd slapped her. "Don't be crude." "Crude? My wife humiliates me in front of half the neighborhood, and you're worried about crude language?" I said I was sorry. "No, you said you were drunk. There's a difference." Laura started crying then, the kind of manipulative tears she'd perfected over the years. They used to work on me, used to make me feel guilty for being angry, like I was the one in the wrong. But something had changed in me during that long night at the diner. Those tears bounced off me like rain off a windshield. "Nick, please, can we try to fix this?" I looked at her sitting there in her wrinkled party dress, mascara streaked down her cheeks, and felt nothing but a cold, hard certainty. "Fix what exactly? Your drinking problem? Your attitude problem? Or the fact that you're screwing Scott Williams?" "I'm not. Don't lie to me, Laura. I may be boring and unambitious, but I'm not stupid." She opened her mouth to protest again, then seemed to think better of it. We sat there in silence as the sun came up outside the kitchen window, painting everything in shades of gold and amber that made the whole scene feel surreal. Finally, Laura spoke. "What do you want me to say?" "I want you to tell me the truth." Another long silence, then. "We've been seeing each other for about 3 months. Seeing each other." "Yes." "Is that what we're calling it?" "Nick, are you in love with him?" The question seemed to surprise her. I don't know. Maybe. It's complicated." "It's really not. You either are or you aren't." "Yes, then. I think I am." There it was. The truth, finally, laid out on our breakfast table like the morning paper. I should have felt devastated. Instead, I felt relieved. The uncertainty was over. The pretending was done. Okay, I said. Okay? Okay, now I know where we stand. Laura looked confused, like she'd been prepared for anger or tears or pleading, but not for calm acceptance. What does that mean? I stood up from the table. It means I'm going to shower and change clothes, and then I'm going to make breakfast for my daughters. After that, we'll see what happens. Nick, wait! But I was already walking away. I had planning to do, and for the first time in months, I knew exactly what I was planning for. The first thing you learn as a home inspector is that problems are usually worse than they appear on the surface. A small water stain on the ceiling might mean a minor roof leak, or it might mean the entire second floor is about to collapse into the living room. You can't know for sure until you start digging. My marriage, as it turned out, was a lot like a house with foundation problems. The cracks had been there for years, but I'd been too close to see them clearly. Over the next few days, I started paying attention. Really paying attention. And what I found made my stomach turn. Laura had gotten sloppy, overconfident. Her phone, which she used to guard like state secrets, was suddenly left lying around the house. Her laptop stayed logged in to social media accounts I didn't even know she had. It was like she wanted me to find out, or maybe she just didn't care anymore if I did. The text messages were the worst part. Not just because of what they said, but because of how they said it. The casual cruelty. The way she talked about me like I was some kind of burden she was stuck with. Scott. When are you going to tell him? Laura. Soon. I just need to figure out the logistics. He's not going to make this easy. Scott. Guy's a loser anyway. You said so yourself. Laura. I know, but he's not going to just roll over. He'll fight for the house, the kids. Texas law favors the mother, but he could make things complicated. Scott. Let him try. I've got connections. We'll bury him. That last message was from 2 days before my birthday party. While I was picking up decorations and buying beer for people I thought were my friends, my wife was planning my destruction with her boyfriend. But it got worse. There were messages with Amy, Karen, and other women in our social circle, a whole group chat dedicated to dissecting my inadequacies and planning Laura's exit strategy. Amy, just make sure you get everything you can in the divorce. Don't let him guilt you into being generous. Karen, exactly. You've put up with his boring ass for 10 years. You deserve compensation. Laura, I'm not worried. My lawyer says Texas is a community property state. I'll get half of everything, plus spousal support, plus child support. Amy, and then you can marry Scott and live like a queen. His business is doing so well. I screenshot everything, saved it all to a secure folder on my work laptop. If Laura wanted to play legal hardball, she was going to find out that boring old Nick had learned a few things over the years, but the real eye-opener came when my brother Tom called me at work 3 days after the party. You sitting down? He asked. Should I be? Your boy Scott Williams has quite a history. Want to hear about it? I was in the crawl space of a house in Plano, checking for foundation settling, but I stopped what I was doing and paid attention. Let me guess. Multiple divorces? Worse. Scott Williams, age 39, has been arrested twice for domestic violence, once for assault and once for harassment. No convictions. The charges got dropped or pleaded down each time. But there's a pattern. My blood went cold. Domestic violence? Gets worse. His last girlfriend, a woman named Jennifer Hayes, filed for a restraining order 8 months ago. Claims he threatened to kill her dog when she tried to break up with him. Real prince your wife picked. Jesus. There's more. This business of his? It's basically a pyramid scheme. Sells some kind of nutritional supplements to desperate housewives. The state attorney general's office has had complaints, but nothing they can prosecute yet. I thought about Laura's messages, about Scott's connections, and his promises to bury me. Tom, I need a favor. Name it. Can you keep digging? I want to know everything about this guy. Where he lives, what he drives, who he owes money to. Everything. Nick, what are you planning? I'm planning to protect myself and my daughters. Laura's made her choice. Now, I'm making mine. That evening, I came home to find Laura in the kitchen, cooking dinner like nothing had happened. She'd been doing that for the past few days, acting like the birthday party was just a minor misunderstanding that we could sweep under the rug and forget about. "How was work?" she asked, not looking up from the stove. "Educational. Yours?" "Fine. I showed 3 houses today. Might have a bite on the Henderson property." We were being so civilized, so polite, like strangers sharing an elevator. Beth and Janie were in the living room, doing homework, and pretending they couldn't feel the tension that filled the house like smoke. Kids are smart. They know when something's wrong, even when the adults are trying to hide it. After dinner, after the girls had gone upstairs to get ready for bed, Laura finally brought up what we'd both been avoiding. "Nick, we need to talk about what happens next." "Do we?" "Yes, this can't go on forever. The girls are starting to notice." "Notice what?" "That that things aren't normal between us." I looked at her across the kitchen table. She'd changed out of her work clothes into jeans and a sweater, tied her hair back in a ponytail. She looked like the woman I'd married, but I knew better now. I'd seen behind the mask. "What do you want me to say, Laura?" "I want you to say that we can figure this out like adults, for the girl's sake." "Figure what out?" She sighed, like I was being deliberately obtuse. "The divorce, Nick, the custody arrangement, how we're going to divide things up." So we're getting divorced now? Aren't we?" I leaned back in my chair. "I don't know. Are we?" "Nick, don't play games. You know this marriage is over." "Because you decided it was over. Because we both know it's not working anymore." "We do?" Laura's composure cracked slightly. "Yes, we do. We haven't been happy in years, Nick. You know that." "I thought we were just going through a rough patch. Turns out you were going through Scott Williams." She flinched. "That's not fair." "Fair? You want to talk about fair? Let's talk about you planning my humiliation with your boyfriend and your girlfriends. Let's talk about you discussing divorce strategy while I was buying beer for your party." Laura's face went white. "How did you know about that? I told you I'm not stupid, Laura. Boring, maybe. Unambitious, definitely. But not stupid." She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her recalculating, trying to figure out how much I knew and how much damage it could do to her carefully laid plans. "Okay," she said finally. "So you know. What do you want?" "What do I want?" "To make this go away, to keep this quiet. What's it going to cost me?" And there it was. The real Laura, finally showing herself. Not the grieving wife who'd made a mistake. Not the confused woman who'd gotten drunk and said things she didn't mean. This was the woman who'd been planning my destruction for months, now trying to buy her way out of the consequences. "You think this is about money? Isn't everything?" I stood up from the table. "No, Laura, it's not. But you're about to find out what it's really about." "What's that supposed to mean?" I smiled at her, and it must have been a cold smile because she actually leaned back in her chair. "It means the game's changed. You wanted to play hardball? Fine. But you might want to ask Scott about his track record before you put all your chips on him." I left her sitting there and went upstairs to tuck my daughters into bed. They were the only innocent parties in this mess, and I was going to make damn sure they came out of it okay. Everything else was negotiable. The beauty of living in a suburban neighborhood is that everyone knows everyone else's business, but they pretend they don't. It's like living in a small town, except everyone has college degrees and drives SUVs. The downside is that when your personal life explodes, it becomes everyone's entertainment. Word of the birthday party incident had spread through our social circle like wildfire. I knew this because people started treating me differently. The men were either overly sympathetic or awkwardly distant, and the women looked at me like I was a wounded animal, They weren't sure whether to pet or put out of its misery. Karen Mitchell had apparently confessed everything to her husband Dave, because he showed up at my house the Saturday after the party with a 6-pack of beer and an apology. "Jesus, Nick, I'm sorry," he said, settling into one of the lawn chairs on my back patio. "Karen told me what really happened, what Laura said, what Karen said, the whole damn thing." "How's Karen doing?" "Embarrassed as hell. She can't believe she said that stuff. She likes you, you know. She was just trying to make Laura look bad." Mission accomplished. Dave took a long pull from his beer. "So what's the story? Are you and Laura splitting up?" "Looks like it." "Because of Scott Williams?" I looked at him sharply. "What do you know about Scott Williams?" "Not much, but I've got eyes, you know. The way he was looking at Laura at the party, the way she was looking back. Plus, Amy Rodriguez has been running her mouth all over the neighborhood." "What's Amy been saying?" "That Laura's finally found someone who appreciates her. That you never deserved her anyway. That Scott's got money and connections and treats women like queens." I almost choked on my beer. "Scott Williams treats women like queens?" "That's what Amy says." "Why?" I told him what Tom had found out about Scott's history. The arrests, the restraining orders, the pyramid scheme business. Dave's face got darker with every detail. He said when I finished, "Does Laura know about any of this? If she does, she doesn't care. She's convinced he's her ticket to a better life." "What are you going to do about it?" "I'm going to let her find out for herself. But first, I'm going to make sure my daughters are protected." Dave nodded. "Need any help with that?" "Maybe. Depends on how ugly this gets." It got ugly fast. The next Monday, I came home from work to find Laura in the kitchen with a man I didn't recognize. He was wearing an expensive suit and carrying a briefcase, and he had that predatory look that lawyers develop after years of billing by the hour. "Nick," Laura said, standing up from the kitchen table. "This is Robert Castellanos, my attorney." Castellanos stood and extended his hand. "Mr. Harlan, I've heard a lot about you." I ignored his hand. "I bet you have." "Nick, please," Laura said. "Can we just try to be civilized about this?" "Civilized? You brought a lawyer into my house without telling me." "Our house," Castellanos corrected, "and Mrs. Staples has every right to seek legal counsel." I looked at the papers spread out on my kitchen table. Divorce documents, custody agreements, financial disclosure forms. They'd been planning this ambush for days. "Get out," I said. "Excuse me?" Castellanos looked genuinely surprised. "I said get out, both of you. If Laura wants to serve me papers, she can do it properly, but you're not conducting business in my kitchen." "Mr. Harlan, I understand you're upset." "You don't understand anything. You're a stranger in my house, trying to help my wife steal my children and my property. So get the hell out before I call the police." Laura's face was red with embarrassment. "Nick, you're being ridiculous." "Am I? Then let's call Tom and see what he thinks about this little ambush." Castellanos was already packing up his papers. "Mrs. Staples, perhaps we should continue this conversation at my office." After they left, I called Tom and told him what had happened. "They can't do that," he said. "Ambush you in your own home with legal documents. There are procedures." "What kind of procedures?" "The kind that work both ways. If Laura wants to play lawyer games, you need to get yourself a lawyer, a good one." "Any recommendations?" "Yeah, Michelle Dalton. She's a shark, eats guys like Castellanos for breakfast." I made an appointment with Michelle Dalton for the next day. Her office was in downtown Dallas, all glass and steel and intimidation. She was exactly what I'd expected. Mid-40s, perfectly dressed, with the kind of smile that could cut diamonds. "So," she said, after I'd explained the situation, "your wife is cheating on you with a man who has a history of domestic violence, and she's trying to ambush you into a quick divorce settlement. That's about the size of it. And you have documentation of the affair?" I showed her the screenshots from Laura's phone, the text messages, the social media posts. She looked through them with the focused intensity of a surgeon examining X-rays. "This is good," she said finally. "Very good. Texas is a no-fault divorce state, but adultery can still affect property division and custody arrangements, especially when there's a pattern of deception. What about Scott's criminal history? Even better. Any judge is going to think twice about awarding custody to a mother who's involved with a man who has multiple domestic violence arrests. So what's our strategy?" Michelle Dalton's smile got sharper. "Our strategy is to let them make the first move, then crush them. Your wife thinks she holds all the cards because she's the mother, and because Texas tends to favor women in custody cases. She's about to find out she's wrong. How long will this take? Depends on how reasonable they want to be. But based on what you've told me about her attorney and her boyfriend, I'm guessing they're going to try to play hardball. That's fine. I like hardball." I left her office feeling better than I had in weeks. For the first time since the birthday party, I felt like I had some control over the situation. But Laura wasn't done surprising me. I got home that evening to find Scott Williams sitting in my living room, drinking a beer and watching my television like he owned the place. Laura was nowhere to be seen. "Where's Laura?" I asked. "Upstairs, packing some things," Scott said, not bothering to stand up or turn off the TV. "She's going to stay at my place for a while. Give you both some space to think." "Is she now?" "Yeah, she is." Scott finally looked at me, and his expression was pure arrogance. "Look, Nick, I know this is awkward, but it doesn't have to be ugly. Laura and I are in love. You two are finished. We can do this the easy way or the hard way, but either way it's going to happen." "And what's the easy way?" "You don't fight the divorce. You agree to joint custody of the kids. Laura gets the house. She's the one who found it anyway. And you get to start over somewhere else. Clean slate for everybody." I sat down in my recliner, directly across from Scott. Up close, he was exactly what I'd expected. Artificially tanned, overly groomed, with the kind of aggressive confidence that comes from never having been punched in the face. "That's generous of you," I said. "What do I get out of this deal?" "You get to keep your dignity and your teeth." There it was, the threat I'd been waiting for. "Scott, let me ask you something. Does Laura know about Jennifer Hayes?" His confident expression flickered for just a moment. "Who?" "Jennifer Hayes, your last girlfriend, the one who had to get a restraining order against you." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do. You threatened to kill her dog when she tried to break up with you. Ring any bells?" Scott's face was getting red. "You don't know what you're talking about, asshole." "What about the domestic violence arrests? Does Laura know about those?" "Those charges were dropped. But the arrests happened, just like the assault charge, just like the harassment charge." Scott stood up, and for a moment I thought he might actually take a swing at me. Instead, he smiled that predatory smile I'd seen at the party. "You think you're smart, don't you? You think you got something on me. But here's the thing, Nick. Nobody cares about ancient history. Laura sure doesn't. She's too busy thinking about her future. Our future. What about your business? Does she know that's a scam too?" "My business is perfectly legal." "Legal, maybe. Ethical? That's another question." Scott finished his beer and set the bottle down on my coffee table without using a coaster. "You know what your problem is, Nick? You're a small man with a small mind living a small life. Laura figured that out. Too bad it took her so long. And you're a con man with a history of violence who preys on lonely women. Laura figured that out yet?" Before Scott could answer, Laura came downstairs with a suitcase in each hand. She looked back and forth between us, sensing the tension. "Everything okay down here?" "Fine," Scott said, his smile snapping back into place. "Nick and I were just getting to know each other better." "Good. I think it's important that you two find a way to get along, for the girl's sake." I looked at my wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, standing in my living room with her suitcases, ready to walk out on 10 years of marriage for a man she barely knew. A man with a history of violence and a talent for manipulation. "Laura," I said, "are you sure about this?" For just a moment, she looked uncertain, like she was seeing the situation clearly for the first time. Then Scott put his arm around her shoulders, and the moment passed. "I'm sure," she said. "This is what's best for everyone." They left together, and I sat alone in my living room, surrounded by the wreckage of my old life and the possibilities of whatever came next. Upstairs, Beth and Janie were doing their homework, blissfully unaware that their world had just shifted on its axis. I was going to have to tell them something, but not tonight. Tonight, I was going to start planning. Because Scott Williams had made one crucial mistake. He'd threatened me in my own house, in front of witnesses. My security cameras had recorded every word. And if there's one thing you learn as a home inspector, it's that every structure has a weak point. I was about to find Scott's. Laura moving in with Scott turned out to be the best thing that could have happened to my case. Within a week, Michelle Dalton had enough ammunition to sink a battleship. "Your wife is making every mistake in the book," she told me during our second meeting. "Moving in with her boyfriend before the divorce is final, taking the children to his apartment for overnight visits, posting pictures of their relationship on social media. It's like she's trying to lose custody." "What about Scott's background check?" "Even better than we hoped. Turns out Mr. Williams has been evicted from 3 apartments in the last 2 years for non-payment of rent. His business is being investigated by the State Attorney General's office for fraudulent business practices. And here's the kicker. He owes $43,000 in back child support to an ex-wife in Oklahoma." I whistled low. Does Laura know about any of this? If she does, she's doing a good job of pretending otherwise. Her attorney is trying to fast-track the divorce, which tells me they want to get this done before she finds out what kind of man she's really involved with. "So, what's our move?" Michelle's predatory smile was getting more pronounced. "We let them dig their own grave. Every day your wife stays with Scott Williams, every overnight visit with your daughters, every social media post, it's all evidence of poor judgment. By the time we get to court, the judge is going to wonder what kind of mother exposes her children to a man with Scott's history. But I wasn't content to just wait for the legal process to play out. I wanted Scott Williams to understand exactly who he was dealing with. The opportunity came the following Saturday. Laura was supposed to pick up Beth and Janie for the weekend, but she was an hour late. When she finally showed up, she was driving Scott's ridiculous Jeep, and she looked like she hadn't slept much. "Sorry I'm late," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Scott had some business to take care of." "What kind of business?" "Just business. Are the girls ready?" Beth and Janie came downstairs with their overnight bags, but I could see they weren't thrilled about the arrangement. Beth, especially, had been asking questions about why Mommy was living somewhere else and why they had to sleep on Scott's couch when they visited. "Dad," Beth said, pulling me aside, "do we have to go? Scott's apartment smells weird, and he's always on the phone yelling at people." "What does he yell about?" "Money stuff. He uses bad words." I knelt down to Beth's level. "You and Janie stick together this weekend, okay? If anything happens that makes you uncomfortable, you call me right away." "What kind of things?" "Anything. If Scott gets angry, if he yells at you or Mommy, if he makes you feel scared, promise me." "I promise." After they left, I decided to do some reconnaissance of my own. Scott's apartment complex was in a rundown part of town, the kind of place that advertises move-in specials and has more security cameras than a casino. I parked across the street and waited. Within an hour, I saw something interesting. A man in a suit knocked on Scott's door, and when Scott answered, they had what looked like a heated conversation. The man was holding papers, legal documents from the look of them. Scott was gesturing angrily, and at one point he slammed the door in the man's face. The man walked back to his car, and I got a good look at the license plate. When I ran it through Tom's police contacts, It came back registered to a law firm in Oklahoma, the same state where Scott owed all that back child support. Things were starting to unravel for Mr. Williams. The next piece of the puzzle came from an unexpected source. Amy Rodriguez, Laura's best friend and biggest enabler, showed up at my house on Sunday evening, looking nervous and guilty. "Nick, can we talk?" I almost slammed the door in her face. Amy had been one of the ringleaders in the group chat that had spent months dissecting my inadequacies. But curiosity got the better of me. "What do you want, Amy?" "It's about Laura and Scott." I let her in, but I didn't offer her coffee or ask her to sit down. "I think Laura's in trouble," Amy said without preamble. "What kind of trouble?" "Scott's not what he pretended to be. His business is falling apart. He owes money to a lot of people, and he's been getting angry with Laura. Really angry." "Angry how?" Amy looked uncomfortable. "He yells at her, calls her names. Last night she showed up at my house with a bruise on her arm. She said she fell, but you don't believe her." "No, I don't." "Nick, I think he hit her." I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. Whatever Laura had done to me, whatever she'd said about me, she didn't deserve to be abused, and my daughters were spending weekends in that environment. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I feel guilty about the things we said, the way we treated you. You're not perfect, but you never hurt Laura. You never made her afraid. What do you want me to do about it?" "I don't know. Talk to her, maybe. She won't listen to me. She's convinced that if she just tries harder, Scott will go back to being the charming guy she fell for." After Amy left, I called Michelle Dalton and told her what I'd learned. "This changes everything," she said. "If Scott Williams is physically abusing your wife, and your children are being exposed to that environment, we can get an emergency custody order. Tonight, if necessary." "What do I need to do?" "Get me proof. Pictures of the bruises if possible. Testimony from witnesses. Anything that shows your daughters are in danger." I didn't have to wait long. Laura called me at 11 o'clock that night, crying, "Nick, can you come get the girls, please?" "What happened?" "Scott and I had a fight. He's been drinking and he's scaring them." "I'll be right there." I drove to Scott's apartment complex with Tom following in his patrol car. We found Laura and the girls waiting in the parking lot, huddled together next to the Jeep. Laura's lip was split, and there was a red mark on her cheek that was going to be a bruise by morning. "Mommy, I want to go home," Janie was crying. "We're going home, baby," I said, scooping her up. "We're going home right now." Tom was examining Laura's injuries with professional interest. "You want to press charges?" "No," Laura said quickly. "It was just a misunderstanding. He didn't mean to—" "Laura," I interrupted, "look at me. Did Scott Williams hit you?" She looked away. "It was an accident. He was drunk, and he was angry about some business thing, and I said something that set him off. That's not an accident. That's assault. I don't want to make this worse than it already is." Tom and I exchanged glances. We'd both seen this before. The victim protecting the abuser, making excuses, minimizing the violence. "Laura," Tom said gently, "this isn't going to get better. Men like Scott don't change. They escalate. You don't know him like I do. I know his type. I've arrested dozens of guys just like him." But Laura wasn't ready to hear it. She was still convinced that Scott's violence was somehow her fault, that if she just handled him better, loved him more, he'd go back to being the man she thought she'd fallen for. I took the girls home and put them to bed, then sat in my kitchen making plans. Scott Williams had just made his biggest mistake. He'd put his hands on the mother of my children, and he'd done it in front of my daughters. That was going to cost him everything. The next morning, I filed for emergency custody of Beth and Janie. Michelle Dalton had the papers ready before the courthouse opened, and by noon, we had a hearing scheduled for the following day. "The judge is going to want to see evidence of immediate danger to the children," Michelle warned me. "Laura's bruises help, but we need more." "What kind of more?" testimony from the children about what they witnessed, documentation of Scott's criminal history, proof that Laura is unable or unwilling to protect them. That afternoon, I had a long, careful conversation with Beth and Janie about what had happened at Scott's apartment. What they told me made my blood run cold. Scott had been drinking all day. He'd been yelling on the phone about money, using language that made both girls uncomfortable. When Laura tried to get him to quiet down, he'd grabbed her arm and shaken her. When she pulled away, he'd slapped her across the face. Beth tried to get between them, Janie told me, tears streaming down her face. Scott pushed her away and called her a bad word. What word, honey? The B word. He called Beth a little B word. A grown man had put his hands on my 10-year-old daughter and called her a witch. If Scott Williams had been in the room at that moment, I would have killed him with my bare hands. Instead, I called Michelle Dalton and told her what the girls had witnessed. That's it, she said. We've got him. No judge in Texas is going to allow overnight visitation in an environment where the children are being exposed to domestic violence. The custody hearing was scheduled for 10 o'clock the next morning. I spent the evening preparing Beth for what she might have to tell the judge, trying to explain it in terms a 10-year-old could understand. Am I in trouble, Dad? No, sweetheart. You're not in trouble. You're helping to keep yourself and Janie safe. Is Mommy in trouble? That was harder to answer. Mommy made some bad choices, but she's not in trouble. She just needs to learn how to make better choices. Is Scott going to be mad at us? Scott's not going to be around anymore, honey. That's what we're going to make sure of tomorrow. The hearing went exactly as Michelle had predicted. Laura showed up with Robert Castellanos and a face full of makeup that couldn't quite hide the bruising. Scott was notably absent. Beth testified in the judge's chambers, speaking clearly and bravely about what she'd witnessed at Scott's apartment. The judge listened with a stone face, taking notes and asking gentle questions. When Beth was finished, the judge called all the attorneys back into the courtroom. Based on the testimony I've heard today and the evidence presented, I'm granting Mr. Harlan's petition for emergency custody of the minor children. Mrs. Staples will be allowed supervised visitation only, and under no circumstances are the children to be exposed to Mr. Scott Williams. Laura broke down, crying. Castellanos looked like he'd been hit by a truck. Michelle Dalton looked like a shark that had just smelled blood in the water. Outside the courthouse, Laura confronted me one last time. Are you happy now? She demanded. You've got what you wanted. What I wanted was for my children to be safe. You made that impossible. Scott's not a bad man. He's just going through a rough patch. Scott Williams is a violent criminal who hits women and children. If you can't see that, then you're not fit to be a mother. It was harsh, but it was true. And somewhere deep down, I think Laura knew it. That evening, I tucked Beth and Janie into their own beds, in their own house, safe from Scott Williams and his rough patches. Tomorrow, I would start the process of rebuilding our lives. But first, I had one more score to settle. 3 weeks after the custody hearing, Laura was still living with Scott Williams, still convinced that their love could overcome his little anger management problem. The bruises had faded, but according to Amy Rodriguez, who had become an unlikely ally, they'd been replaced by new ones. She won't listen to anyone, Amy told me during one of our clandestine coffee meetings. Her friends have all tried to talk to her, but she's completely under his spell. He's isolated her from everyone who cares about her. What about her family? They've disowned her. Her parents are mortified. They loved you, you know. They can't believe she threw away her marriage for a man like Scott. I wasn't particularly interested in Laura's family drama, but I was concerned about the long-term implications for my daughters. As long as Laura was with Scott, she was a potential danger to them. The supervised visitation was working for now, but eventually, she'd petition the court for more access. And if she could prove she'd left Scott, she might get it. But Laura wasn't going to leave Scott voluntarily. She'd invested too much in the relationship. sacrificed too much to admit she'd made a mistake. She was going to ride this disaster all the way to the bottom unless someone gave her a push. That someone was going to be me. The opportunity came on a Friday night in November. Tom had been keeping tabs on Scott's activities, purely in his capacity as a concerned law enforcement officer, of course, and he'd noticed a pattern. Every Friday night, Scott went to a bar called Murphy's Tavern to meet with potential recruits for his pyramid scheme. He'd get drunk, make big promises about easy money, and try to sign up desperate people for his supplement scam. "He's there right now," Tom told me over the phone. "Been drinking for 2 hours. Laura's at home." "How do you know Laura's at home?" "Because I drove by Scott's apartment 20 minutes ago. Her car's there, lights are on." I'd been planning this moment for weeks, gathering information, documenting Scott's activities, building a case that would destroy him completely. But I'd been waiting for the right opportunity, the right moment when all the pieces would fall into place. Tonight was that night. I drove to Scott's apartment complex and parked across the street, just like I'd done weeks earlier. But this time, I wasn't there to observe. I was there to act. Laura answered the door on the second knock. She looked terrible, thin, pale, with dark circles under her eyes that no amount of makeup could hide. "Nick? What are you doing here?" "We need to talk." "Scott's not here." "I know. That's why I'm here." She let me in reluctantly. The apartment was a mess. Empty beer bottles, takeout containers, clothes scattered everywhere. It smelled like cigarettes and desperation. "Laura, look at yourself. Look at this place. Is this really what you wanted?" "You don't understand. Scott's going through a difficult time. His business is a scam. He's being investigated by the state attorney general's office." "That's not true." I pulled out my phone and showed her the news article Tom had found. "Williams Enterprises under investigation for fraudulent business practices." Her face went white as she read. "Scott said this was just a misunderstanding." "Scott says a lot of things. Most of them are lies." I showed her the rest of what I'd gathered. The eviction notices, the child support judgments, the restraining orders from previous girlfriends. By the time I was finished, Laura was crying. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because you're the mother of my children, and I don't want them to grow up thinking their mother was an idiot." "I'm not an idiot." "Then stop acting like one. Scott Williams is a con man and an abuser. He's using you, Laura. When he's done with you, he'll throw you away just like he did all the others." "He loves me." "He hits you." "That was just what? Just a misunderstanding? Just a rough patch?" Laura broke down completely then, sobbing into her hands. "I don't know how to get out. I've lost everything. My friends, my family, my children. I have nothing left." "You have a choice. You can stay here and let Scott Williams destroy what's left of your life, or you can leave. Tonight." "Where would I go?" "Anywhere but here. Get a hotel room, call your parents, move in with Amy. I don't care where you go as long as it's away from him." "What about my things?" "What things?" "Laura, look around. You don't have anything worth saving here." She looked around the apartment, really seeing it for the first time. The squalor, the emptiness, the complete absence of anything that resembled a life worth living. "He'll come after me." "No, he won't. Because if he does, he'll have to deal with me. And my brother. And every cop in Dallas who's sick of guys like Scott Williams." Laura was quiet for a long time, thinking. Finally, she looked up at me with something that might have been hope. "If I leave him, will you consider letting me see the girls more often? If you leave him, and stay away from him, and get yourself into therapy, we can talk about it." "You do that? After everything I've done to you?" "Laura, I don't hate you. I'm disappointed in you, and I'm angry at the choices you've made. But I don't hate you. You're still the mother of my children, and they need you to be better than this." She started packing then, throwing clothes into the same suitcases she'd brought when she moved in with Scott. It didn't take long. She hadn't accumulated much during her time in paradise. What about Scott? What do I tell him? Nothing. You leave him a note and disappear. Let him figure it out. He's going to be furious. He's going to be furious anyway. The difference is, you won't be here when it happens. Laura finished packing and looked around the apartment one last time. I can't believe I gave up everything for this. You didn't give up everything. You still have a chance to be a good mother. Don't waste it. I helped her carry her bags to her car, then followed her to a hotel near the airport. She checked in under her maiden name and paid cash for a week's stay. What happens now? She asked as we stood in the parking lot. Now you figure out who you want to be when you grow up, and you stay away from men like Scott Williams. What about us? Is there any chance? No, Laura, there's no us anymore. But there's still you, and there are still our daughters. Focus on that. I left her standing in the hotel parking lot and drove home to my girls. They were asleep in their beds, safe and secure, dreaming whatever dreams 10- and 7-year-olds dream. But I wasn't done with Scott Williams yet. I got home around midnight to find Tom waiting in my driveway. How'd it go? Laura's gone. She's staying at the airport Marriott under her maiden name. Good. Because Scott just got back from the bar and he's not happy about finding an empty apartment. How do you know? Tom grinned. Because I've been sitting across the street watching him tear the place apart for the last hour. He's called Laura about 50 times, left some very interesting voicemails. Interesting how? The kind of interesting that violates the restraining order Laura filed this afternoon. I stared at my brother. Laura filed a restraining order? Yep. Right after you left her at the hotel. Seems like your little heart-to-heart gave her some clarity. So, if Scott's been calling her, he's in violation of a court order, which means I get to arrest him. Tom's radio crackled, and he answered it. After a brief conversation, he turned back to me with a satisfied expression. That was dispatch. Scott Williams just got pulled over for drunk driving about 2 miles from here. Seems like he was heading this way. Coming here? Looks like it. Had your address written on a piece of paper in his car, along with some very unfriendly notes about what he planned to do when he found you. The pieces were falling into place beautifully. Scott Williams, drunk and enraged by Laura's departure, had violated a restraining order and gotten caught driving under the influence while apparently planning to commit assault or worse. How long will they hold him? DUI, violation of a restraining order, and terroristic threatening. He's looking at serious jail time. Plus, his parole officer in Oklahoma is going to want to have a conversation with him. Parole officer? Oh, did I forget to mention that? Scott Williams is on parole for his last domestic violence conviction. Getting arrested in Texas means he's going back to Oklahoma to finish his original sentence. I started laughing. I couldn't help it. Scott Williams, the smooth-talking con man who was going to bury me, was about to spend the next several years in prison. There's more, Tom said, grinning. The state attorney general's office executed a search warrant on his apartment tonight. Turns out he's been running his supplement scam out of there, and they found enough evidence to file federal fraud charges. Federal? He was using the mail to defraud people across state lines. That's a federal crime. He's looking at 5 to 10 years minimum. The next morning, I woke up to find my phone buzzing with text messages. The news of Scott Williams' arrest had spread through our social circle like wildfire. Amy Rodriguez, Karen Mitchell, and several other women who'd been taken in by Scott's charm were all reaching out to apologize, to express their shock, to distance themselves from the man they'd thought was such a catch. But the most important message came from Laura. Thank you for last night. I'm going to get help. I want to be a better mother to our girls. It wasn't an apology. Laura had never been good at those, but it was a start. 6 months later, Laura was living in a small apartment across town, working part-time at a different real estate agency, and seeing Beth and Janie every other weekend under gradually relaxed supervision. She was in therapy, attending Al-Anon meetings, and slowly rebuilding relationships with her family and friends. Scott Williams was serving 8 years in federal prison for mail fraud, with additional state charges pending in Oklahoma and Texas. His supplement empire had collapsed, his assets had been seized to pay restitution to his victims, and his name had become a cautionary tale in our suburban community. As for me, I was learning to be a single father, which turned out to be easier than being married to someone who didn't respect me. Beth and Janie were thriving, secure in the knowledge that their home was stable and their father would always protect them. The house felt different now, lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted from the foundation. I was in the backyard one Saturday evening, grilling burgers while the girls played on their swing set, when Karen Mitchell appeared at the fence that separated our properties. "Nick, can I talk to you for a minute?" I walked over to the fence. Karen looked embarrassed, the way she had ever since the birthday party incident. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry, about everything. The things I said, the way I acted. You didn't deserve any of that." "Water under the bridge, Karen." "Is it, though? I mean, we used to be friends, all of us, and we treated you terribly." I thought about that for a moment. "You know what the funny thing is? You all thought you were helping Laura by tearing me down, but if you'd really been her friends, you would have told her she was making a mistake." We should have. We all knew Scott was bad news, but we were so caught up in the drama of it all. It was like watching a soap opera. Except it was real life, with real consequences. I know, and I'm sorry. I looked at Karen, middle-aged and suburban, trying to apologize for her role in the destruction of my marriage. She wasn't a bad person, just weak and easily influenced, like most people. "Karen, can I give you some advice?" "Sure." "The next time you see a friend making a mistake, a real mistake that's going to hurt them and their children, don't be an enabler. Be a friend. Tell them the truth, even if they don't want to hear it." "I will. I promise." That night, after Beth and Janie were in bed, I sat on my back porch with a beer and thought about the events of the past year. My marriage was over, my social circle had been decimated, and my life had been turned upside down. But my daughters were safe, Laura was getting the help she needed, and Scott Williams was exactly where he belonged. In the end, that was all that mattered. The game was over, and for the first time in years, I'd won.